I'm so glad we finally got a chance to speak, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us about, I want to say Voc Rehab, but it's VR and E now, isn't it? Veteran Readiness and Employment.
That's correct. And thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about our program.
Absolutely. Real quick, why the change in the name?
So that's an interesting story. When I took this position back in June of 2018, I went across the country from sea to shining sea, as I like to say, conducting a listening tour with our employees, with our veterans, and with our stakeholders. And in talking to these great American individuals, I began to learn that many of them either came late to our program because of a misconception about what the program was about, or they would not participate in the program because of the name, Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment. And that word rehabilitation carried quite a stigma with it. And it's often referred to in modern time definition as rehabilitation out of drug and alcohol abuse, rehabilitation out of criminal activity, or restoring one to a whole person. So veterans would tell us, I didn't consider myself to be that broken, or those terms did not resonate with me. So they were not accessing the benefit because of those reasons. And we also had employers who were very concerned over potentially the type of employees they would be getting from our program for the very same reason.
Interesting. So employers were seeing the word rehab, and I don't really know how the whole program really works. So I thought it was kind of like an addition to the GI Bill. That's what has kind of been taught to me from veteran to veteran. Is that not what it is?
So let me explain what the program is for your benefit and the benefit of your listeners. So we are separate and apart from the GI Bill. We are Veteran Readiness and Employment Service. We administer Title 38, Chapter 31 benefits to service members, veterans, and certain family members, where we assist them. They must be a veteran with at least a 10% disability, and we assist them in preparing for, finding, and maintaining employment.
Very good.
And education can be a very big part of that as we prepare them for reimagining their careers after a disability in service.
Now, you're the executive director of this program of Veterans Readiness and Employment.
Yes.
The name of the role is a lot easier. Director of Veterans Readiness and Employment. It's a lot easier on the tongue when compared to other roles in government and other roles in the Beltway here in DC. Can you quickly give me an explanation of your role?
So my role is to administer this program from a programmatic standpoint, policies and procedures, but also manage our field operations. We have over 350 locations throughout the country and overseas. And so working with those stations from a field operations perspective to ensure that they are getting everything that they need to be successful in administering their program in their location, and making sure that we're held accountable to the taxpayers for the investment that they've made in returning veterans back into the workforce.
Very good. Very good. William, you've had a long history with the veteran benefits side of VA. You started out as an employment coordinator in Chicago. Kind of, looking at your resume, kind of moved all over the country depending on the role. And not even in the lower 48. You were based out of Portland, but you served an office you were in an office that served Alaska, and I'm sure you've probably spent some time up there.
I sure did.
Yeah, I say that because I'm a child myself of the Pacific Northwest. I miss salmon, razor clams, Dungeness crab, prawns, not shrimp, prawns. All the good Pacific Northwest seafood. Real quick before we really get into VR&E. What's one role that you've had or one area of responsibility that many veterans don't consider but is important? It could be a role or benefit that you've helped deliver that you've seen during your time.
So I would actually have to say the position that I'm in now. And I say that to you, Tanner, because I couldn't be more passionate about this program because of my history and having been in the program myself.
Being in VRNE when it was?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. That's outstanding.
Yeah. So when I entered the program in 2002, I had lost my job after the horrible effects of 9/11. That industry that I was in and executive recruiting dried up. I found myself a single dad with 3 kids, unemployed for the first time in my entire professional life. And I needed a place to turn, and Veteran Readiness and Employment was that place. So then I started to work for the VA, and I've worked for the VA in Veteran Readiness and Employment from a frontline employee to a director in the field and now leading that program.
Yeah.
So I approach my engagement with our participants in a way that I think nobody else can. So when they're talking to me about their fears or their concerns or what they're trying to achieve, I've been there. I know what it's like from every perspective in this program. So it's just a wonderful opportunity, and it brings a lot of credibility to bear when I am engaging with our stakeholders and other partners because of where I've come from to achieve this level in the organization.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you're I didn't know you were partook in the veteran in the program yourself, but you are a veteran, 9 years enlisted in the Navy. Real quick, where did you serve?
So my first tour of duty after our boot camp, which was in Orlando, and A school, which was in Pensacola, Florida, I went overseas to Italy for 3 years, and then I became a Navy recruiter back to my hometown in Chicago, recruiting out of my own high school and others around that area. And then my last tour of duty was in San Diego.
That's outstanding.
At Naval Air Station North Island. Yep.
That's outstanding. Where in Italy? Was it Naples or Sigonella?
San Vito, Italy.
I don't know where that is at all. Only reason I asked, as I spent time in Sigonella. That's the only reason.
Yeah, it's in the boot, and it is a small communications base on the Adriatic Sea near the port of Brindisi.
I'm sure you had fun there. Wine's good out there.
Oh, it is really great. I miss it.
As a veteran, what does it mean for you to work in the roles that you've worked in here at VA and in VRNE? You kind of alluded to it, but what does it mean for you to work in the role that you work in?
So I always say that there is no more noble mission in the federal government than working for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I'm proud and honored to continue in my service to my country and my fellow countrymen and women to ensure that the benefits that they've earned are given to them in a manner that honors their service. And each and every day, and in every role that I've ever had, where I see lives changed for the better and veterans are able to lift their head up high and to be proud of the work that they're doing because of the programs that they've benefited from, the VA overwhelmingly heartwarming, and I well up with pride over the thought of the millions of veterans that we serve each and every day, from their health care to their benefits until their final resting place with our memorial affairs. I am so proud to be in this role, and I could never fathom leaving the VA because of the terrific mission that we have been blessed to oversee and administer to our veterans.
Yeah, I think, one thing that I missed when I left the military was the way to give back, the feeling of giving back. And I feel like personally, I found it here at VA myself. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Back on track with VRNE. I've never used VRNE, like I said, but I've heard that the feedback I've gotten from other veterans that they love the idea, but sometimes they find it difficult in its implementation. Now I've heard that you guys have been hiring a lot of counselors to address that.
Yes. So when I took over this role, we had counselors with caseloads up to 480 to one counselor, which is an untenable situation to be in and try to manage month in and month out. Well, there's a public law that was enacted in 2017 that required the secretary to maintain a one counselor to every 125 veterans. So in 2019, FY 2019, we deployed an additional 169 counselors across the nation to bring those caseloads down to a manageable level so that counselors have enough time to spend with veterans in assisting them in their direct facing veteran needs and requirements. So that was a really good news story. We maintained the 1 to 125 throughout 20, and we're actually getting an additional 132 new counselors in 21 to continue because our program is growing. So obviously we need to continue to provide more resources so veterans are not impacted by high caseloads.
Yeah. High caseloads equal longer wait times, and absolutely, that's outstanding to hear. Real quick, who is eligible for this program for VRNE?
To be eligible for the program, and there's two distinctions here, and oftentimes veterans get confused by it, and I can understand why. So I'll try to explain it as clearly as possible.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's eligibility. So to be eligible for the program, first, you must be a veteran with a service-connected disability of 10% or greater.
Okay.
You must not have surpassed the eligibility delimitation point of 12 years. So it's either 12 years from being discharged from service. If you recall, in the old Montgomery GI Bill, you had to use it within 10 years of discharge.
Yeah.
This is 12 years from the date of discharge or the first notification of a VA-rated disability. That the clock could start there, even if it's 15 years after you have discharged from the service.
Okay.
So that is eligibility, and you have to apply too, of course. And entitlement is a little bit different. So after you're found eligible for the program, a counselor will make an appointment with the veteran, invite them into the office, and determine whether or not the veteran is entitled. And so for a veteran to be entitled to the program, their disability must be directly causing a barrier to employment. So let's say they are a heavy equipment operator in the military and they have all of these orthopedic issues as a result of an accident or long-term service over a period of 20 or 30 years, and they're no longer to do that physical type of labor. That would be a barrier to employment, Tanner, and then we would conduct a comprehensive evaluation of their interests, aptitudes, and abilities to determine how they can reimagine their new career and their career goals in the future so that they do not impact and continue to worsen their disabilities. And I think that's the key here with our program in terms of our great vocational rehabilitation counselors serving veterans in a way that protects them and keeps them safe, all the while addressing their career goals and needs through our comprehensive evaluation process.
Got you. What is that? What does some of that evaluation process look like? Is it something where you sit down and decide and figure out like the four lenses, what you're good at, what you lean towards, and figure out a way to reimagine that skill set into a different career path? Like,
absolutely, you're speaking to the essence of what it is that we exactly do. So we provide them with a program orientation and let them know all the different features of the program. And then we conduct a vocational educational assessment and a career interest scope. And then we conduct a personal interview. Yeah. We review the veterans' medical records and their disability ratings so that we have all the information we need to provide the best guidance that we can to the veteran. And then they conduct an interview with the veteran to come up with a plan of service that is one that the veteran is excited about and wants to participate in and has a high interest and also the aptitude to be successful in that program.
Gotcha. That makes a lot clearer sense than what I've been told before. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Another thing I've been told is many veterans I've talked to think that this is something that you use after exhausting the GI Bill. Is that true? Personally, it's all I've ever heard. Is this something?
Well,
go ahead.
So I would recommend the opposite, quite frankly, if you're a veteran with a disability, because of the comprehensive wraparound services that I just mentioned to you, in addition to tuition and the housing allowance and all of that. We also pay for all of the necessary tools and equipment that may be required in a specific program of service. But I like to use the analogy of if you had come into a windfall of cash through some inheritance and you wanted that investment to grow so that at some point, maybe it's not enough to retire today, Tanner, but if you play it smart and you get good guidance, and then perhaps in 5 years, you could retire off of your investments and live out your life with financial security. So I ask veterans, would you take on that investment strategy on your own? And they always say, oh, no. I would hire a financial planner so that they could guide me so that this money would be protected and it would grow. And I said, it's a similar situation in veteran readiness and employment, where you have a trained professional certified counselor who can provide that same level of guidance. So your investment of your benefit is going to result in a successful outcome. And that's the goal. Too often, and this is what really troubles me when I think about veterans out there who are not getting the guidance that they need, is that they will come to us after having used a lot of their Chapter 33 entitlement, which is the GI Bill.
Yeah.
And they don't have a degree to show for it, or they kind of bounced around and changed majors. And then they come to us and it's 3 years into using a benefit, which is fine. But had they come to us up front, we could have provided those wraparound services and guidance to get them on the path and keep them on the path until they graduate from a institution of higher learning or some other training program or an apprenticeship program or something like that.
So VRNE can help with guiding like your future education in the form of your GI Bill. Make it more efficient.
Yes. Yes. And we also have the Chapter 36 program. It's an educational vocational assistance that veterans who are within a year of discharge, or within 6 months of discharge rather, and a year after being discharged, can get that guidance for their Chapter 33 benefits. So they can request that guidance from the Department of Veterans Affairs, from Veteran Readiness Employment, and our Office of Transition and Economic Development. So that is a benefit that's available to them if they meet that criteria. So if they're eligible for an education benefit within VBA, they are also eligible for that personal growth and career planning guidance.
Tracking. Got you. Now, if someone does exhaust their GI Bill, they can still come to you guys if there still needs to be a career change, correct?
Yes. So the GI Bill has 36 months of entitlement, maximum entitlement.
Yeah.
Our program has 48 months of entitlement. So they would still have a year of entitlement. One note to your listeners, you have to have at least 1 day of Chapter 33 entitlement, or the Forever GI Bill, to get the Chapter 33 BAH rate in veteran readiness and employment. So save a month of your entitlement just to be safe if you're coming to VRNE, so that when you do get into VRNE, you're able to participate at that higher rate of subsistence.
Gotcha. Okay. Say I'm a veteran. I'm going to throw a scenario at you real quick. I'm a veteran. I'm looking at a school or a trade school in the fall. I'm out of GI Bill money, or I'm thinking about using VRNE before the school starts, so I can make sure it's the right school, make sure I'm set up properly. When should I be starting the process of applying for VRNE?
So as early as you possibly can, because there are steps in our program to get you to that point of having your plan of services approved, and that's ensuring that you're eligible, finding out that entitlement piece, and then the actual evaluation and planning stage, which can take a little bit of time based on what the veteran is trying to achieve. So I would recommend at the very earliest that you can start engaging with us, that you do, because there's a lot of other things that you can benefit from in the program, and we want you to be set up for success and not cutting it close or missing the term.
Makes sense. So if I'm looking at a fall school, I should be looking at almost, a year out, or like the winter or the spring or something like that. Of saying, hey, I better get with the VRNE now, just to make sure I got all my ducks in a row.
Absolutely.
Very good. Can someone reach out to you if they're getting out of service, if they're active duty, and say they're looking at something in the fall and it's springtime? They have maybe they're in their terminal leave.
Yes. So if they're within 6 months of their date of just discharge and they have applied for a memorandum rating, we can't give them a rating until they're actually discharged. But we can bring them into our program if they have a memorandum rating of 20% service-connected disability or greater. And we also, for our veterans with disabilities who are in medical transition units around the country, on 70 military installations, we operate the IDES program, which you may have heard about, the Integrated Disability Evaluation System.
Yeah.
And that's for veterans who are being medically separated from the military. They will be referred to a vocational rehabilitation counselor for automatic entitlement into our program. So that's very important for them to understand, because before they're discharged, and if they're going through the med board process, they are, by public law, automatically entitled. There's no question of entitlement before they're discharged. But on the day they're discharged, if they haven't established that automatic entitlement, then they would have to, and it's no longer automatic.
Okay. Man, I'm trying to think about ways to tell the veteran, the military community that, the active duty, like if there's a better way to tell them. Hopefully they listen to this episode. That is
one thing I would tell you, Tanner, is that we have really enhanced our transition assistance programs at all of our military installations. Last fiscal year, we revamped the training materials to include all of this information so that veterans, transitioning service members, are able to learn about what I just spoke about.
Yeah.
And they have one thing that I thought was really, really cool in the redevelopment of the training materials is that there's now it's not a test, but it's a opportunity after each training session to kind of apply your knowledge in some scenarios so that you have a clear understanding of if it applies to you or not.
That's great. But who else I think should know are the staff and COs, the COs, the first sergeants, those that, because sometimes you don't know until they go to TAPS a week before they get out.
Right. Yes.
I would love to help figure out a way to tell the first sergeants. Really, they're the ones that should, the COs, the XOs, your gunny, man, if they were prepped with that knowledge, they'd be able to help so many more transitioning service members in an earlier stage than what we can get them at the TAPS class.
Well, interestingly, Tanner, this year, since we've completed our renaming and rebranding, we are going to expand our outreach and education of our programs to include military installations and the IDES process alongside veteran readiness and employment. So it is our plan this year to do a lot of webinars, a lot of personal presentations over Zoom or Teams, and to reach out to those communities to make sure they're aware of these benefits, because they're quite crucial in respect to the IDES automatic entitlement to the program is vital for those service members to be aware of.
Absolutely. And please feel free, sir, to use this podcast and this blog when we're done with it as a resource for that. Please.
Absolutely.
Please.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And if you got any links you want me to add into the blog, for any reader that might, hey, click here to go to learn more about IDIS or something like that, I'll put that in there. That's not a problem. So that way you can use that blog as a tool for when you start doing that outreach. Be more than happy to do that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there any limiting factors on how this program can be used? Basically, I heard back in the day, hey, use the GI Bill for your bachelor's and master's, but then you use Voc Rehab. It used to be called Voc Rehab, now VRNE, for your doctorate or your law degree. Maybe this is a good Mythbusters part of the podcast. Is there any limiting factors? Is that true? What are some other maybe common misconceptions when it comes to VRNE?
So that's a great question. And we do get folks who come to us for those specific reasons. Now, what I would point out to you in reflecting back on our entitlement discussion is there still a barrier to employment? So if this veteran has prepared themselves for entry into a career in the legal field, a lawyer, whatnot, has he or she achieved all that is required to enter into that career goal? So if they have not, then there's a likelihood that they would be approved for something like that. If they have, then they would be considered suitable and job ready, and we could provide them with employment services to help them search for, prepare for interviews, develop their resume, dress for success, and all of those wraparound services we provide after their training is complete, and then help them find a position in their career field out in the private sector or within government. So that would all be determined by their meeting with the Vocational Rehabilitation Counselor. But what I'd like to tell your listeners is please apply and have that conversation, because oftentimes we hear that veterans are like, oh, this seems complicated. I don't think I'll ever get into this program, so I'm just going to forget about it. Please, please, please do never do that. Always come and get the right guidance and advice from the professionals and the experts to ensure that you're not missing out on this benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's an interesting conversation that you can have. So it's, so a conversation could go, hey, I've exhausted all my GI Bill money. Except for the one day that I have left, or 1 month that I have left. I've gotten as close as I can to a law degree, or I just need to pass the bar and get some clothes. That's a conversation that you can have with that counselor, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Very good.
Yeah. And the one other thing that prevents, in certain circumstances, veterans from pursuing in our program is that they will come to us steadfastly seeking a career path that is detrimental to their health, and we cannot support those. So oftentimes they'll say, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to do that, and they do so, and then they'll come back after a while when the guidance they receive comes to bear, where their disabilities are worsening because they're still in a very heavily physical type of career. And typically these disabilities don't get better with age.
Yeah. Gotcha. Very good. Very good. Well, William, I think in a very short period of time, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that I've missed or haven't asked that you think it's important to share?
Sure. So I want to just touch on just kind of the process for coming into the program, and then the 5 tracks to employment.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you've heard about them, but I'd like to share them with your listeners because I think it's very important. So the first step is to apply. So we want you to apply. You can apply, as I mentioned, within 6 months of discharge with the memorandum rating, or if you're you're going to be discharged for medical under the IDES program, you will apply. We will determine your eligibility, and then we will invite you for an orientation session. And then when you come in and you're oriented to the program, you will then be greeted by a vocational rehabilitation counselor. That counselor will sit down with you and make a determination of entitlement, as we mentioned, and start the evaluation and planning process. After the evaluation and planning process is finished, you will have agreed upon your program plan, and will begin the execution of that program plan. It could be an associate's degree, bachelor's, master's, whatever is decided and agreed upon by you and your counselor. And then you'll have, of these options will be the following: reemployment with the previous employer. So that's the first track. So perhaps you went on a tour of active duty, or you're in the reserves and you came back with some injury, but you want to go back to work with your previous employer. We can conduct an assessment, provide any additional training you might need to bring your skill set up to speed, and we can provide workplace adjustments or reasonable accommodations based on any changes that you've had physically.
Sure.
Then we have rapid access to employment, which I kind of alluded to just a moment ago. And that's where maybe you have all the education and training that you need, but you also need some assistance in the employment search and the preparation for that. So we can provide nominal training for some things, and then get you on your way with your resume, dress for success, and so forth.
That's a skill in and of itself, the job search.
Yes. It truly, truly is. And then, taking your combat boots off your resume, as we call it, and all of that.
Yeah.
So you can be relatable to private sector employers who may not have a military background. The next one, number 3, is self-employment. So those veterans who are entrepreneurial in nature and have a idea of their own business that they would like to start, we can work with them on that as well.
Oh, wow.
And then the majority of our program participants, and that's why people get confused with your statement of, is it a combination of the GI Bill and veteran readiness and employment? And that's employment through long-term services, where veterans are going to institutions of higher learning and obtaining degrees to pursue careers in their chosen field. Mm. And that's the majority of our participants are in that employment through long-term services track. And the last one, which is very important to mention, Tanner, on this podcast, is independent living. For those veterans whose disabilities are so serious, or they are currently not able to go to work, we can conduct a comprehensive independent living assessment to ensure that you have mobility in your home, that your activities of daily living are met based on your disabilities, and that your relationships and engagement with your family and the community are upheld by some avocational interests as well. So we do home modifications for veterans. We provide assistive devices. We provide computers and all of that, so we can train them, get them on the internet so they can use all the latest and greatest technology to remain connected in the community. And the last thing that I would like to say is, during the COVID pandemic, we were able to make a very quick pivot to an all virtual environment to maintain the health, safety, and welfare of our employees and our participants. So we use VHA's video platform called VA Video Connect to conduct face-to-face, technology-driven interviews. We never missed a beat. We have all the technology so that we can continue to provide veterans services in the program uninterrupted, and we're really proud of the work that we've done in that space. So if the regional office is not open for business physically, brick and mortar, rest assured we are all working. Every regional office staff is working to continue to support veterans that are in the program and to onboard veterans into the program who are applying today.
Very good. Now, as COVID evolves, and someday hopefully we'll come out of this, is that something that you're looking at, a capability that you're looking at keeping in your program?
Yes. In fact, I'm leading a project in VBA now to make recommendations based on lessons learned and best practices to provide veterans with more options and better access. So combining and mixing these platforms for customer service delivery still within our brick and mortar regional office facilities, online, self-service, and a whole host of other ways to really provide services in a way that our veterans want them and they experience in their own personal lives.
Yeah, rural veterans will probably keep appreciating the Tele VA Connect app to do it virtually. That's outstanding.
We've done over 100,000 appointments using VA Video Connect since March 1st. Wow,
that's outstanding. That is outstanding. Okay, William, where can people find the services? That's probably the last but most important question for anybody that's listening to this.
Yes, if your listeners want assistance with connecting with a vocational rehabilitation counselor or applying for our programs, there's two main ways that they can do that. They can call our amazing call agents at 1-800-827-1000, or they can find us online at benefits.va.gov.